This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this great edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Yes, we're in a crisis right now. Things are happening around us. We had election results of last Tuesday. I'm a Florida voter. I'm involved in that. You'll see what I'll be doing to try to make sure that the correct person won that election. It looks like the Democrats now are trying to steal both the Senate and gubernatorial elections with usual corruption in Broward and Palm Beach counties. But we also had this week, and we're going to get back to all of this. We have some great guests today. We have Laura Loomer, who's out there in Minnesota, who has uncovered election fraud there with Muslims. We have Charles Woods, the father of Ty Woods, who died in Benghazi. But I want to now get first to the issue of the firing of Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Long overdue, something that the president did within 24 hours of the election of last Tuesday. I admire him doing that, not worrying about the appearance. But it doesn't solve the problem. And although we now have Matthew Whitaker, the chief of staff of General Jeff Sessions, in place, it's unclear whether he'll be able to continue. He's being attacked viciously by the left, by Democrats and others. He is not someone of gravitas. He's there basically just as a placeholder until we get an actual attorney general nominated and then confirmed. And in that regard, I recommend Bob Barr. He's the person that I worked with. He was a former U.S. attorney from the Northern District of Georgia. He was a former congressman. He and I worked together with other conservatives to submit articles of impeachment during the Clinton years. He's the only person, as I've said on this show, because he's been on many times, that I could depend on and trust in the U.S. Congress to this very day. Bob's independent. He would get the job done. Also being mentioned is Chris Christie. Now, Christie might actually be good, even though he's a politician, because he's irreverent. Frankly, he doesn't care much about anything. But I doubt that he could be confirmed given the fiasco that occurred with the bridge, and it was alleged that he testified falsely or made false statements about his involvement in that entire scandal. And frankly, I'm not sure he gets along with President Trump. He was an adversary of President Trump for a long period of time leading up to the elections in 2016. So I recommend Bob Barr, and I urge you all to contact the White House, to contact other entities in and around Washington, D.C., and promote Bob Barr as the next Attorney General. But let's get back to the state of the Justice Department right now. We now have a Democrat-controlled House of Representatives as of early January 2019. It's going to be presided upon by Nancy Pelosi, that vile individual from San Francisco, from the left coast. But worse than even her is Gerald Nadler, Congressman Gerald Nadler, who's going to chair the Government Oversight and Reform Committee. And then you have Adam Schiff, the congressman from West Hollywood, also vile, an individual who will be head of the House Intelligence Committee. And then you got Maxine Waters and her ilk, who's in charge of the Banking Committee, who said she's going to extract revenge on banks and other people. These people are crazy. And Nadler was already overheard saying on a train the other day that he intends to not just impeach Trump, but to impeach Kavanaugh. Now, they can do this, you see, because they now have a majority. It only takes a majority vote in the House to start impeachment. And when that happens, if you remember going back to the Clinton years, a impeachment manager will be appointed. There'll be a staff paid for at taxpayer expense, of course, and they'll conduct an investigation leading up to the impeachment, to the vote. Now, the Democratic Party, far left as it is very united, and they want The president figuratively, and I think actually when you see all this violence, dead. And they're going to impeach him, and the matter is then going to be sent over to the U.S. Senate for a trial. Who will be presiding over that trial? But the Rhino Republican Chief Justice John Roberts, the guy who rubber-stamped Obamacare with all the problems that we have today in that regard. It doesn't bode well. He's not going to put the Democrats or anyone over there on a short leash. And while the president will not be convicted, what's going to happen in the next 2 years is that this country is going to be ground to a halt as we face threats from North Korea, from Iran, from our southern border with invasions of people from Central America, with infiltrations of Muslims and others that don't wish us well. I'm not talking about all Muslims, but ones who are radical Muslims, terrorist-oriented Muslims. So we face a real crisis here. And that's why the president's firing of Sessions was not enough. He now has to put Mueller on a short leash. He is, in fact, the head of the Justice Department, although even the husband of Kellyanne Conway is coming out saying that this was unconstitutional to put in Matthew Whitaker, who was Sessions' chief of staff, because he wasn't confirmed. And he's wrong about that. As an aside, by the way, I don't know how Kellyanne can continue on with this guy. I really don't. I'm not telling her what to do in her personal life. But I don't think that marriage is long for the world. But getting back to the point is that the president, as the president, he's the head of the executive branch. He can instruct anybody he wants to fill in for the attorney general right now on an interim basis. He can appoint a recess attorney general when the Senate goes out of session, not too long into the future. I hope he does with Bob Barr, as I've said. But he must himself put limits, either through an intermediary or through a directive on Mueller. He must say, Mueller, you're going to be finished in 2 weeks, or you're out. You've had enough time. You've wasted enough taxpayers' money, tens of millions of dollars. Your witch hunt is over. The president can't worry about what the reaction is going to be with the Democrats. It's already clear they want to kill him. They want him out. They want him removed. The Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, who's there only in name only at this point, he's been neutered, thank God. He wanted to wire himself. He wanted to entrap the president and have him removed under the 25th Amendment by acting like Brutus during the Roman Senate and stabbing a back into Caesar's back, a knife, I might add. And this is what the president faces. So he needs to take strong action himself. Now, he's been dragged along by his do-nothing lawyers. Rudy Giuliani, who's going through a nasty divorce right now with his, I believe, a third wife, and he can't focus on what's going on. Jay Sekulow, also a nice person like Giuliani, is not up to the task. He's a religious rights lawyer. He's not a criminal defense lawyer. He's not a prosecutor. So therefore, the president needs to take control himself right now. And Matthew Whitaker, I think I've had some dealings with him with regard to Bundy, and we're going to discuss that shortly. Matthew Whitaker is someone who himself is not of gravitas, cannot really continue on and take any strong action. He is someone who wants to come up the line. He doesn't want to become radioactive if he ever gets a higher appointment. So you need somebody in there quickly that's going to do the job, and if it can't be done, then the president needs to do it himself. So that's where we are today, and that's why we need to take very strong action here at Freedom Watch. That's why we have citizens' grand juries. That's why we're looking into the leaks of Robert Mueller, and that's why we're seeking to have him indicted through those citizens' grand juries. We need to have him removed. We can't allow this to continue. And consequently, that's the state of the nation today. And there are other ramifications with regard to Attorney General Jeff Sessions. I had been trying to get Jeff Sessions to take action and withdraw the appeal of the Bundys, of Clive and Bundy, Ryan Bundy, the other defendants in that case, Mel, Dave, the peaceful protesters. Now there's nobody in charge. And this is going to be in a state of limbo. So the president needs to take charge himself. It's time for him to grant a pardon for the Bundys, even though they were never convicted of anything. He can do it, and get rid of the Bundy case as well, because no one is really in charge at the Justice Department. And that's the tragedy of this whole thing, because our justice system is sinking into a sea of abyss. We have no justice system. And you can see what's going on in Florida today after the elections. I was down there voting. And at the time that I was voting, I was asked by the volunteer that was sitting there if I had received a paper ballot, which I hadn't, in the mail. And I said no. But if I had said that I did, I could have voted twice. And now we know that the supervisor of elections in Broward County and in Palm Beach County are coming up with tens of thousands of votes that weren't counted on time. These are likely fraudulent ballots that have been created as an insurance policy. Heard that word before with regard to President Trump, with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and others, that if Andrew Gillum, that socialist race-baiting individual, that corrupt mayor of Tallahassee, didn't win, that they'd figure out a way, the Democrats, to cook the election, to steal the election. Same's true with Rick Scott, the governor of Florida, who won the race for senator. Now, look, I'm not taking sides. We're nonpartisan. But I'll tell you something. I want the person who actually won to win. And that's why, just like I did in the year 2000 when I was at Judicial Watch, which I founded, we're going to be intervening in this election. I'm filing today public records requests to open up all the ballots because the supervisors of election, both Democrats, the one in Palm Beach being Brenda Snipes, no relation to Wesley, although he was born in Florida, is making her own determination as to what people wrote on the ballots, even the scanned ballots. Same in Palm Beach. It's a terrible situation. Even Marco Rubio, who doesn't like Trump and doesn't really care much for him and his goals, even he is being highly critical of what's going on in Florida. So consequently, this is what I'm doing. And I'm also a voter of Florida. And I can move and get in and file a complaint individually to be side by side with those Republican attorneys to make sure that we, the people, have a say in this election. Because what's at stake in Florida is what's at stake in the nation. And I'll be right back with more from Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Dangerous.
You don't care. Use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm back with Laura Loomer, a very brave person who takes on the powers to be, a true conservative, an activist, who was up in Minnesota last week, and she uncovered election fraud there. Laura, tell us about that, because this is a nationwide epidemic of election fraud. People say, well, the Russians have hacked our election machinery. You know, the real threat here are these state election officials that allow this fraud to occur. So tell us about what you've uncovered in Minnesota. It's gotten a lot of press.
Yeah, so I've been here in Minnesota, and of course Keith Ellison was running for Attorney General, and his campaign was clouded by accusations of domestic violence, his ties to Louis Farrakhan, his endorsement of Antifa, and he was not supposed to win. Even polling was showing that he was behind Doug Wardlow. And of course, he ended up winning the election, 49% to 45%. And, you know, as soon as the election ended, like reports of voter fraud were coming in of people witnessing buses in Somali neighborhoods here in Minnesota, busing Somalis to the polls to vote for people like Keith Ellison and Ilhan Omar. And, you know, if you look at a map of Minnesota and the district and the way that the voting is broken down, there's only pockets of blue voting bases, but that is, of course, where all the refugees are living. That's where, you know, these large cities like Minneapolis and St. Paul, of course, that are packed with Democrat voters. But if you look at the state, a lot of it is it's fairly red. And I was getting reports from people telling me that absentee ballots were being sent to psychiatric hospitals in Minneapolis, and that felons were filling out were filling out absentee ballots. And of course, all of this stuff needs to be investigated, but we hear the same stories every single year. And it's really not a conspiracy theory like people want you to think. I mean, just in Texas today, 9 people were arrested after it was found that they committed voter fraud. And look what's happening in Florida and Georgia and Arizona right now, where the Democrats are destroying ballots. And Brenda Snipes, who openly admitted that she destroyed ballots so that Debbie Wasserman Schultz could win the election, she's in charge of this counting measure that's taking place. So I'm on my way to Florida right now to investigate this. But, you know, there's no denying the fact that voter fraud is rampant in this country, and it affects everybody. And people really need to start paying attention, because elections have consequences, as many know. And when you elect these people who have no shame about destroying ballots and rigging a democratic system in our country, well, it's only going to negatively impact the citizens who live in those states and in those counties, because now they have corrupt officials.
Well, this is what happened in 2000. As you might remember, Laura, we're both from Florida, by the way. I intervened when I was at Judicial Watch. We sought to open up the ballots in Palm Beach County and Dade County and in Broward County. And there's actually a picture of me being peered upon by Teresa Lepore of Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections on the Internet. I'm writing a column tonight for WorldNetDaily.com, WND.com, and we're going to embed that picture. And it shows you the adversarial nature of just simply trying to figure out who won the election. And then, of course, I'm a voter. I can bring a lawsuit. You can, too, for fraud. Thank God in Florida, any voter can do it, any voter or taxpayer. And I'm going to be there side by side with the lawyers for Governor Rick Scott. You know, I'm coming in a nonpartisan way on behalf of Freedom Watch. Let the person who won the election actually be shown to have won. Now, I'm convinced that Rick DeSantis won the governorship. I'm convinced that Rick Scott ran the senatorialship. But let the chips fall where they are. But what's happened in Florida is that all of a sudden tens of thousands of ballots that should have been counted within the deadline have appeared. And my own experience, as I said in the first segment last week, I went in to vote in person, and the volunteer, the woman, asked me, "Did you ever get a paper ballot in the mail?" And I said, "No." She says, "Okay, you can vote here." I could have voted twice. You know, and so this is the problem that we face. It's not just true in Florida, it's true in California, it's true in New York, it's true throughout the entire country. Our system is corrupt, and we have no guarantee that Andrew Gillum, this socialist, this anti-Semite, this person who frankly plays the race card, could wind up with this fraud to be the governor of Florida. And the same's true of Nelson. I don't think Nelson's a bad guy, but he hasn't done anything. I incidentally once voted for Nelson because Mel Martinez, the Republican, did nothing when I asked him to help one of my clients. So this is serious. And Laura, thank you for coming on. We're going to bring you back next week. I know you're in an airport right now, but I wanted you to report on what was going on in Minnesota. So safe travels.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll be right back.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I now want to introduce my very valiant client, friend, the father of Ty Woods, who died in Benghazi. You know about that. You've seen the movie. You've read the book, I'm sure. His son was a tremendous hero. I also got to know Pat Smith, whose son, Sean Smith, died at Benghazi as well. I brought a lawsuit for them. I want to explain a little bit about what that lawsuit was about, because this is a demonstration of what happened, about why our justice system is broken and needs to be repaired. And Charles was also administrative law judge. He can talk with authority with regard to how judges should behave. But as you might remember, a few years ago, I brought a lawsuit against Hillary Clinton for Charles Woods and Pat Smith as the parents of their sons who bravely died at Benghazi. Now, the reason that they died is that they were working alongside Ambassador Chris Stevens. And the reason that they were able to be located was because Hillary Clinton had used a private email server as Secretary of State, which we now know was hacked by adverse interests, most likely Iran, most likely terrorist groups. I mean, the technology is not that difficult these days to hack a cell phone service with text or anything else. The technology doesn't just exist for the NSA, but it exists pretty much for everybody that wants to acquire it. And that is what gave up the coordinates of Ambassador Chris Stevens. It was obviously passed on to al-Qaeda, and that resulted in the murder of Ty Woods and Sean Smith, as well as the ambassador and others at Benghazi. In addition to that, and I'll let Charles, lay it out for us after I give this little introduction, is that Hillary Clinton claimed initially publicly, as did others, Susan Rice, ambassador to the UN, that this was just a walk in the woods, in the words of Hillary, by Muslims who were upset about a video produced by someone in California criticizing the Prophet Muhammad. And we turned out that Hillary Clinton knew that it was al-Qaeda. She had that intelligence from U.S. intelligence services and probably foreign intelligence services, and even told the president of Egypt that it was al-Qaeda when she was lying to others. Now, she also lied to Charles. Charles wrote down in his diary what she said. And when Pat Smith and Charles came out and said, no, that's not, the real story here, Charles had actually recorded it in his diary, she defamed Charles and Pat because she was running for president at that time, and she had to prove that she hadn't lied. So we brought a lawsuit for wrongful death and for defamation against Hillary Clinton. Now, when Hillary Clinton defamed Charles and Pat, she was no longer Secretary of State, so she was not immune. She couldn't make any claim of governmental immunity to that private lawsuit, kind of like when Paula Jones, sued Bill Clinton. He was president, but if you do something in your private capacity before you're president, or after for that matter, you're not immune. And with regard to the wrongful death lawsuit, which did result when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, there's a body of law under the Westfall Act that if you're committing a crime, you can't have immunity for your actions. And this was a crime, 17 different crimes in terms of violating classified information, using a private server and cell phone, destroying evidence and everything else. So what happened then? We filed the lawsuit. It was assigned to a district court judge by the name of Amy Berman Jackson, a recent Obama appointee at the time, highly partisan. And she dismissed the case on the eve of Memorial Day. Can you believe that? On the eve of Memorial Day, when Gold Star parents were grieving for their sons, it was like she was sticking it to them and besmirching the memory of Ty Woods and Sean Smith. Now, why did she likely do that? Because she thought Hillary Clinton was going to be elected president, and maybe Hillary would return the favor someday and put her on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, or maybe even the Supreme Court. Who knows? Whatever her motivations were, they were not pure. But more importantly, she didn't have valid grounds to dismiss the complaint. But what happened then? We took it up on appeal to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. The panel, there's a 3-judge panel that decides these cases, was comprised of one judge in particular, Patricia Millett, highly leftist, again an Obama appointee, who had actually donated money to Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2008 to be president. And I said to her, politely, Judge Millett, you must get off the case. There's an appearance of a conflict of interest and a lack of partiality here, impartiality. But she refused. Now, the other judge, the second, was a judge called Pilliard, and she was highly leftist as well. Her husband is a leftist professor at Georgetown, and she's even further left than he is. I didn't move to have her recuse herself. I mean, there was not really a basis other than her politics, regrettably. And the third justice was Brett Kavanaugh. Now, Kavanaugh is very political. Don't kid yourself. And the fact that Hillary Clinton's involved, the elite establishment in Washington, Democrat or Republican, in my experience of 41 years of being a trial lawyer, they protect each other. because there by the grace of God go thee. So they affirmed the decision by Amy Berman Jackson to dismiss the case. There was no basis, no legal basis to do that, but they did it anyway. But not to be deterred, I then decided that we would file a petition for writ of certiorari with the Supreme Court, because there's a really important issue here, a constitutional issue. Should federal government officials be immune when they're committing crimes through the use of a private email server and also using a cell phone that was hacked? And there is also a division among the various appellate courts in this country, the federal appellate courts, as to how far immunity can go. I had received decisions during the years I ran Judicial Watch against Louis Freeh. The Fourth Circuit said he wasn't immune when he had his agents break into the home of Notre Trulock and without a warrant take his computer and tried to chill his free speech when he wanted to write a book about how Wen Ho Lee had been stealing our nuclear codes and secrets and how the FBI was sitting there and watching it happen. Notre was then the director of counterintelligence at the Energy Department. He had uncovered this. So this is what we were dealing with. We had a division of circuits between the Fourth Circuit and the D.C. Circuit that ruled differently on another circumstance. Well, what happened just in the last few days? The Supreme Court, which is now controlled, the majority, by conservatives, thanks to Justice Neil Gorsuch, thanks to now Justice Brett Kavanaugh, they didn't take up the certiorari. And why didn't they do it, in my opinion? They didn't do it because Hillary Clinton was involved. She's a protected species. And that's why we have our citizens' grand juries. That's why we're going to present evidence. That's why we're going to have her indicted over Benghazi by the citizens of this country. We'll have her tried. We will have her sentenced, and we will seek to enforce those sentences through President Trump or through citizens' means, peacefully and legally. And that applies to Robert Mueller, Barack Obama, others who have violated the law these many years. But I now want to get the thoughts of Charles, because he was an administrative law judge. He knows the way things are supposed to work. But unfortunately, we live in a dual system of justice today where the establishment elites, particularly of Washington, D.C., are above the law, where they're protected, and where even Republicans in a Democrat context, like with Hillary committing crimes, will protect them because when they are called on the carpet, they want the Democrats to do the same thing. That's my opinion. Charles, give me your thoughts, because the American people need to hear from somebody who truly has had a great loss here for your son, who was just a valiant hero and needs more respect than what we're getting in the court system today.
First of all, Larry, I do thank you for what you've done on behalf of all of the victims of Benghazi in filing that lawsuit. Now, the whole basis of that lawsuit was that the server was hacked, and that was negligent act upon, Hillary Clinton, and it was not in the course of her legitimate employment as Secretary of State. Now, as a result of that, several Muslim terrorist organizations were able to get that information and find out exactly where the Ambassador Stevens was going to be, and where Ty, of course, would be as well. And so ahead of time, this attack was planned because they knew what the itinerary was going to be based upon the information they got from the server. And as you probably recall, there was actually, I believe it was Iran, had a nuclear scientist that was a double agent for the United States. His name was released on that server as well. In fact, he was killed because of her negligence. And, the negligence of Hillary also resulted in the death of my son and the others in Benghazi. And we should, that should not have been dismissed. And the rule of law is basically when you do a motion to dismiss, there's a presumption that all the facts that were alleged by us were true. And if they were true, we should have been able to have depositions and discovery so we could find out exactly what these emails said and who hacked into them. And that was the result that I think would have been honorable in this situation. We need to get the facts out. And it's been 6 years since Benghazi has happened, and we really don't know much more about Benghazi now than we did immediately afterwards. And I think that what the powers to be were afraid of was if they did not dismiss the suit, we would have the discovery and we would know exactly what was in the server that was hacked by these terrorist groups. And so I really have to thank you for filing the lawsuit. I wish it had not been dismissed. I think that's a travesty of justice. But we still have the best legal system in the world. I am so thankful for that.
Well, thank you, Charles. And, you're a really fine person. You're a religious person. You're spiritual like I am. And I believe there will be divine justice in the end. But we do have a Cadillac of a legal system, but sometimes we have drunken drivers at the wheel, and that's what we have here. And it's not funny. I mean, you've got this woman, Amy Berman Jackson. She's done a real number on Paul Manafort and others. I mean, she's so highly partisan. And then it tells you a story, and that's why I wanted to tell it. I'm not embarrassed, when we don't win a case. I'm just sad for you and your son and the American people. Because the way the judiciary is today, it's so politicized that if you win 1 in 10 cases, I said this going all the way back to the time I ran Judicial Watch, now I run Freedom Watch, you're doing really well. And I've scored major victories over the years. But the system is so uneven and it's so stacked against someone that will challenge the rich and powerful that I have to speak out. And I hope that we're going to have a seminar in the next few months. I'd like to invite you to talk about it because we need to reform our justice system. We have right now the possibility of getting a new attorney general. And I hope that we get somebody like former Congressman Bob Barr, who has the courage to really enforce the law. But Hillary Clinton needs to be prosecuted for what went on. It wasn't just negligent. These were crimes. Rudy Giuliani had listed 17 separate crimes that she had committed by using this private email server and busting up her cell phones and bleaching her, the server and everything else to destroy it. And who do you have, that was representing her? A lawyer by the name of David Kendall, who's the Clintons' lawyer over the years. He assisted in that obstruction of justice, but no one does anything to him. There was even a Barr complaint filed against him with the D.C. Bar. They dismissed it because the head of the D.C. Bar Disciplinary Counsel's Office donated to her, donated to Obama, donated to everybody else. The world we live in has pitted left against right. But justice gets the short shrift. And that's why, this is such an important case and why I wanted to explain what went on here and get your thoughts. Now, let me have your thoughts, Charles, about just the state of affairs generally, with the judiciary, because we had a judge this week also in the District of Columbia, a Clinton appointee, declare that the president had violated the Emoluments Clause, which is in the Constitution, by simply having a hotel that he put in trust with his family across the street from the FBI, and that foreign people stay there. So therefore, now he's a subversive conspirator with a foreign interest. The Emoluments Clause was meant only to deal with, whether you're employed by a foreign government as official. So give me your thoughts in 15 seconds, what you think about that, because we're out of time.
Very briefly, is in our legal system, no one should be untouchable. And the problem is we do have a cadre of people, including Hillary Clinton, who are untouchable. And you and I are not untouchable. And no one under our system of justice should be above the law.
Very well said, Charles. I look forward to having you back. I'm not done trying to get justice for your son. You have my word. God bless you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Now here's the verdict. The verdict is this country's falling apart. The verdict is that we, the people, need to rise up. We need to do it for ourselves. The verdict is we need to use citizens' grand juries to bring these criminals to justice, whether it's Robert Mueller, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, George Soros, James Comey, the whole rest of them. Because, as Charles said, people are above the law. And if you can't get justice for his son or the son of Pat Smith, then who can you get justice for when you take on the rich and powerful in this country? And this is where the interests of whatever your political persuasion should merge, whether you're a conservative, whether you're a liberal, whether you're moderate, whether you're libertarian, whether you're a person of faith, whether you're an atheist, whatever your religion might be. Because if we don't have an equal system of justice, we have no country at all. And that was the basis upon which the United States was founded. But like I said during the segment with Charles Woods, is that we have a Cadillac of a legal system on paper. You know, the Soviet Union had a very good constitution on paper. It wasn't that dissimilar from our own. But in practice, it was despotic. In practice, it was communist. In practice, it worked against the people and kept them down. And that's what we've got today. And now we see election fraud in Florida, trying to steal elections yet again in Minnesota, elsewhere throughout the country. We see leftist violence. We see the home of Tucker Carlson attacked, commentator on Fox News, while he was there. He would have been justified with his Second Amendment rights, frankly, in shooting these people that were on his property. They were trying to bust down his door. You go on somebody's property, it's like a burglar. You can take whatever action in self-defense that's necessary. And see, Florida is so important because Florida, there's still a modicum of freedom. I'm proud of my home state. You know, you can still carry without much difficulty. You can't do that in California, for instance. You have the right to defend yourself if someone comes after you. You know, as we saw in the Trayvon Martin case, and they tried to string up George Zimmerman in that case. You know, they tried to put him away for life. But Florida stood their ground, no pun intended. And what happens in Florida, if we don't make sure that the real people won, and I believe it was Rick DeSantis and it was Rick Scott, someone like Andrew Gillum, the corrupt mayor of Tallahassee, gets into office, an ultra-socialist, somebody who has signed petitions in support of radical Palestinians and radical Muslims that have terrorist connections, someone who has used the race card in that debate that he had, several debates, and also in trying to win the election. If someone like him becomes governor of Florida, this is going to be a bellwether for other states. Now, I don't tell people who to vote for. You can probably guess who I voted for. But we can't allow this to happen. Our country's going to slip away. We're going to become another Venezuela, another Cuba, and even worse at the end point, another Soviet Union. And for that reason, that's why I'm standing up. And I need your support. Join our Justice League. Please contribute to our cause. We need to hire more people. We need to file more cases. We need to now intervene in the Florida election fraud that's going on right now. I have the right to do that as a voter of Florida. Laura Loomer can join me. She's a voter too. Others can, but there only needs to be one. And I want to open up those ballots like I did in 2000. You might remember seeing me on C-SPAN and other networks participating in that trial with regard to what happened during that election. I was not even a big fan of George W. Bush. I'm still not. I think he was one of the worst presidents of my lifetime. But, you know, I wanted the correct person to win that case. And he did, with a great judge, Sanders Sauls, who I became friendly with after that. So we need your support, whether it's our citizens' grand juries that are going to start shortly in Orange County, California, whether it's our hard-hitting lawsuits, whether it's taking more action with regard to Ty Woods and Sean Smith, and I have a few things up my sleeve, and whether it's the Bundys or still fighting the tyranny of the federal government, we need your help. I need your support. So take this radio show, share it with your friends, go to our website, sign up for our Justice League, enlist in our citizens' army. You are the superheroes, the people of the United States. Donate handsomely with tax-deductible contributions because we need the resources. And I just want to thank all of you out there for always being so supportive. And I want you to also contact President Trump in the White House and tell him to nominate Bob Barr, who's a good man to be Attorney General. He's not going to be like Jeff Sessions. I'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until then, God bless you, God bless your family, and God save America.